Hey everybody, this is Ashley. Welcome back to the Pink Fresh Studios YouTube channel. Today I'm going to be showing you two different ways that I like to watercolor with my die cuts, and you see the two examples here, and I'd love to show you and get into the details on how I can create different looks by using two different but similar techniques. For my watercolor today, I'm going to be using the Pink Fresh Studio line of liquid watercolors. I love the vibrancy and the shades of these colors, and even though they are liquid watercolors, they seem to react like a creamy watercolor to me, or for me, and I just love that. I went ahead and showed you a few different dyes that you could use with either of these techniques, but for my first card, I'm going to be using the Modern Blooms background die. It's not quite a cover plate die, it's just slightly smaller than an A2 size card, so I shall call it a background die. I'm using the colors Aquamarine and Key Lime, and I'll be using these for the leaves that you see on the die. There are two different sets of leaves. So there are the leaves that come right off of the roses or those florals, and then there's leaves that are sort of branching off, almost just like a different, maybe like a vine or something like that. So the two colors that I've chosen will correspond to the different leaf styles in the die. So I'm going to be using the aquamarine color for those leaves that are coming directly off of the florals, and then I'll be using the key lime green color for the vine leaves. Now you'll see before I put the color down, I actually saturate my brush in clean water, and then I'll go ahead and put the clean water from my brush directly onto whichever leaf I'm starting to work on or starting to put the saturation down on. This makes sure that when I do put the watercolor down on it, it sort of flows and it blends in with itself really easily. I don't have to keep stroking the paintbrush to get a nice vibrancy. And the wet on wet technique is really great for that, which is what I'm showing here. Now, I will work side by side because I want these two colors to blend together. I don't want harsh lines where the two colors meet. I want them to blend together, but the reason that I'm using these two colors is obviously so that you can see that there are two different colors in the die. So I am taking care to make sure that the color stays where I want it to, but I'm also letting it flow freely in with the other colors where they touch and connect. I hope that that makes sense, and I'd like to talk to you a little bit about this technique, which is watercoloring directly onto your die cut. Now, obviously, I've already cut this out, so we've got lots of little divots where the die itself pressed into the cardstock. There might be some imperfections from my cut plates and things like that, and all of this can make watercoloring onto an actual die cut that's already been die cut. It can make it look very interesting, and it can create its own sort of design within the cardstock. Now, obviously, I'm using watercolor cardstock or watercolor paper, so it already has lots of texture, and die cutting it out before can just add that much more. It also, watercoloring onto an already die cut piece of cardstock also lets me do this where I can pick the color where it goes, so I can clearly represent leaves with a couple colors, and then I can clearly represent flowers with another color. When you're watercoloring onto a piece of cardstock or watercolor paper and then die cutting out, you don't know exactly where the die will be. So this really helps to be able to get those colors where you want them if you're looking for a look like that. This technique works wonderfully. So I had at first decided to color these flowers of these roses in yellow. I'm doing the same technique as before, where I'm putting some clean water down on each flower and then going in with my yellow. But as I am putting it on there, I'm realizing it's really not giving me enough definition. And I wanted it to be very apparent that there were leaves and then flowers. And I feel like this here just sort of looks like it all jumbles together. The colors go great together, but it's not enough contrast for me. So I needed to make sure that I picked a dark enough color to go over that yellow so that you wouldn't see it shining through so much, but I also needed to pick a color that wouldn't mud with the yellow. So I have picked the Candy Apple red color from the liquid watercolor line, and I'm just putting this directly over each of those flowers. Now I'm using a wet on dry technique this time because I want to make sure that I get enough saturation on there so that it completely covers the yellow. So this is how it ended up. I like this a lot more just because I can see the definition of the flowers. And now I need to make this a little bit more structured, this die cut. Because there's so many pieces cut out of it, it's a little flimsy at first. So what I'm going to do is cut another piece of cardstock with the same die, and then I'll use this spray adhesive inside a box that I'm showing you. I'm going to use it off camera and across my craft room so that it doesn't get everything sticky, because it will. And I also recommend a box maybe with higher sides than this, but this is just what I have, so this is what I've used. It's very sticky. If you let it dry for just like 30 seconds, it gets nice and tacky, and then you're able to line up the die cuts and put them on. And it will allow you to move a little bit to the left or to the right so that you can get a nice fit for when you're doing something like this and they need to line up perfectly. So now I've got a nice thick and sturdy die cut, and actually I do want to mention that the one that you just saw me glue on there was actually the third die cut. So I cut that same die out 2 more times. So now I have 3 die cuts together, which make a really nice sturdy die cut. Now after I made this nice thick sturdy die cut, I decided that I wanted to cut it out with this ornate banner die. And that's really not too much of a problem, but obviously would have been a little easier had I not made it so thick and sturdy in the first place. But I would have had to add the die cuts anyway, and then I would have had to end up trimming it off. So it really worked out fine. I just had to work at those edges where it didn't quite cut through all the way. So I'm now going to take that outer die for the ornate banner die from this pink cardstock, and I'm going to line them up together so that it's the very inside of this die. And you'll see in just one second that I actually decided to just take the outer edge of the ornate banner and cut it out of this white cardstock to put it over top, sort of just to frame the entire thing. And then I used the Adore Alpha die set to highlight the word you and then the sentiment, "You amazed me." I just think this looks really nice with the pink cardstock in the background with the nice bright vibrant greens and reds and a little bit of gold in there, and I think this is actually a great Valentine's Day card. So I'm happy that I got a jump start on my Valentine's Day with this card. For my next technique, I'm going to be watercoloring directly onto a piece of watercolor paper and then die cutting out of that with my die. So to do that, I want to make a nice bright blend of colors. So I'm going to use Sunshine Yellow, Bubblegum, and Key Lime all together, and I have unwittingly made a stoplight over here on the white portion of my glass mat. But these colors all blend really well together, and I wanted to make sure that I got a really nice seamless blend. So I took my distress sprayer and just sprayed it all over my watercolor paper. I wanted to make sure that it was completely saturated because I want all of this color to move around like you see here. I then went in with even a little bit more water after I added that watercolor to it, and just made sure that I got a really nice blend. Now this might have been overkill on water just a bit, and I happen to have really good quality Arches watercolor paper here, but if you use something with a little less quality, you might want to be sure just to keep your water usage to a normal amount because it could cause a lot of warping, which is why I put that low tack tape around the corners in the first place, but sometimes you can still get that warping. So now I'm using the Leafy frame wreath die, and I've used the actual die and then the inside of the die so that it cuts out this wreath from the paper. If I don't use that inside die, then I just get the cutout around and it will keep the center in, which is great for certain projects. I like to have that option there. Something else I really love about this die is that the actual leaves pop up but don't cut out completely, so you get a lot of dimension like you can see here. I kept this one extremely simple and used the beautiful word die and a black cardstock, and I sort of made sure that it went throughout the popping up leaves in the wreath, and then I just kept the sentiment really quick and simple with the "Hey You" there on the bottom left. I hope that you've enjoyed learning a few techniques about watercoloring onto your die cuts. As always, all of the links are provided in the description, and I'll see you again soon.